Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm so happy and excited today to talk about a very important topic with the help of Dr. Sarah Schewitz. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be a great day today. You guys are going to help you today because there's a lot of talk about in the dating world about what type of person you should be dating or not. Maybe you have somebody even in your family that has some special traits. And because of a lot of pop psychology from Instagram, it seems that everyone seems to have this narcissist problem. So you might have decided, oh, I'm never going to have a narcissist person in my dating life. So, how do you recognize a narcissist? This is something for another day. But how do you recognize if your character, your behavior, your attitude, your aura, your vibrations are attracting a narcissist? That's a question that I want to answer today, and Dr. Schewitz will tell us all about it. So I'm very excited to know what are the traits that make us really appealing and magnetic to a narcissist man or woman. So where do we
Mhm.
start here?
Well, I think where we start is talking about the term super traits. There is this term pathological love relationships, which is the term basically for being in a relationship with a narcissist or somebody who has a personality disorder. And one of the criteria for being in a pathological love relationship is that the victim, the person who's not the narcissist, has these super traits. And they're traits that pretty much across the board, anyone who's in a relationship with a narcissist will recognize it in themselves. And as we get into them, some of you guys listening might be like, oh God, this is me. And I don't want you to worry because in the right relationship, these traits make you an amazing partner, but they also make you a little bit susceptible to being a victim.
Right. So you have identified them. There are probably papers about it, research, there is data. So it's not
Yes.
just somebody coming out with like, oh yeah, in my experience with free guys, they're all like that. No, this is like a psychology talking about it.
Yes,
So
that's right. Yeah, there's actual research on this, and a lot of stuff around narcissism is pop psychology, and so it is important to differentiate that this is research-based information.
Mm. So when we grow up, we develop lots of good traits and some not so good traits, and some will be attracting a personality that will eventually destroy our sense of self love and self esteem and make us feel like we are frail or whatever. We want to avoid that. So looking inwards, what do we have to look for in our character? That's gonna be even another topic, right? Because how do we know if we are?
Mhm. Well, so some of the super traits that have been identified in the research are high levels of agreeableness and conscientiousness. And agreeableness and conscientiousness are both scales on something called the Big Five personality traits test. It's a personality test that a lot of psychologists use, especially in the workplace. If you've ever gotten a job and you have to take some personality tests before starting, often you're taking the Big Five personality test. So some of you may have taken it before. But within agreeableness and conscientiousness, there's all these different facets. And I think that's what we will benefit from talking about. So one trait within agreeableness is that you're really trusting. So obviously there's a pro and a con here. Being trusting is a good thing if you're with a trustworthy person. But being trusting, if you're not with a trustworthy person, is unfortunately makes you a little more susceptible to getting duped.
Right.
Folks who are high on that trust factor, they're optimistic about human behavior and they don't vet in the same way. Like they don't kind of check into people's background or ask a lot of vetting questions. They just kind of assume, I'm a good person, so you're probably a good person too. And unfortunately, that's not the case with a narcissist.
But isn't that a trait? I just finished my psychology diploma a couple of weeks ago, and there was a whole
Oh.
thing on that, and it was saying that we as humans tend to generalize and assume that everyone else speaks and thinks like us and will agree with us, but actually, if you go down, they actually don't.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
was like, ah.
Yes. So that I forget what that theory is called. Do you remember?
No,
It's
in this moment it just escaped in my
I
mind.
know, mine too. I think it might be called fundamental attribution error. Um, or something
Possibly,
like that. It's anyway, I know what you're talking about. That is a
right?
common psychological theory, and that's actually one of the traits that is a super trait for these victims is that they're straightforward. And people who are straightforward assume other people are being straightforward as well. So, folks who are high on straightforwardness, they are upfront, they're honest, they confide easily in others, like they're pretty vulnerable, and they're a little bit prone to oversharing or being a little chattier than most. And they just assume others are like that too. And the fact is they're not. Some people are really manipulative.
Hmm. I have to say, guys, you can relax because so far I have all these qualities and I never married a narcissist, never dated one. So we are safe from this. But going back to your previous, one of the first one that you mentioned, Sarah,
Mhm.
you said it is a person that likes to please others. What was exactly?
Well, there's a few traits that kind of add up to that.
Hmm.
One is that they're overly tolerant. So they can endure a high level of stress, they can endure a high level of really anything. They're more accepting of
Hmm.
differing viewpoints, and they're skillful at dealing with people from different backgrounds. So you can you can kind of quantify that as a people pleaser. They're also really empathetic. So people who are high in empathy tend to be peacemakers. They forgive easily. They tend to be generous in their assumptions about others. Oh, he's just got a lot of trauma he's dealing with, that kind of thing. So yeah, those, and then they're
Hmm.
also humble. So they kind of downplay their own sense of self, their own successes, and they're warm and approachable, which makes them more likely to be victims.
So, yeah, I mean, if I generalize a little bit, lots of women, lots of young women, lots of religious, spiritual
Mhm.
people who think about peace in the world and things like that, they are more likely to, oh, I'm not going to be judgmental. And then they attract because it's easier to bypass a lot of filters there because they don't have this filter. They just assume you're going to be good. Oh
That's
dear.
right.
Oh
That's
dear.
right.
And you described a lot of me. So I'm feeling a bit blessed that I haven't ended up in such a relationship. So did you say all the traits already? I lost
No,
track.
there's a bunch more.
Tell me more. I'm
Okay.
eager.
So these folks tend to be high on cooperativeness, which means they have a giving nature. They derive pleasure from helping others. They're much more willing to compromise and they're considerate of other people's needs, right? So again, these things make you a great partner to the right person. It's just if you are doing all these things and, compromising in these ways and cooperating and providing empathy, all of that to somebody who's trying to take advantage of you or who has no empathy themselves, this is where you get into trouble. So that's one. Another one is that they're loyal, so they don't give up easily on others or on relationships. And again, great quality to have in a healthy relationship. Not so great when you're being emotionally abused or manipulated.
Dan. So basically, if we raise a healthy child that has an amazing personality, is humble, smart, cooperative, that's a person you want to work with, you know? You want to
Mhm.
be in a team with this person. These are actually the people who are more likely to be with a narcissist and not realize it.
Yeah.
The bombshell has dropped here. Should we all become nasty then? That's incredible. Is there more that you're gonna shock me with today?
There are more.
I'm
So
ready.
conscientiousness is that other one of those other factors on the Big Five personality test I was telling you about. And within conscientiousness, there's all these different facets. So people who are conscientious are hard workers, they're goal oriented, they hold themselves to high standards, they're not highly reactive or impulsive, they have good willpower and good staying power. So again, like you can kind of see if you're hardworking, you have good staying power, you're not all that reactive, you can tolerate a lot of crap from others and you can really stick with it even when you probably shouldn't. People who are highly conscientious are easily made to feel guilty. And this is one of the tactics that we know narcissists use a lot is gaslighting you and making you think you're the one that's doing something wrong, and making you feel guilty for the fights that you have or the boundaries that you want to set with them or like the reasonable expectations you have in a relationship. Um, but because you're high on conscientiousness, it's easier to make you feel guilty about those normal things.
Anymore?
Yeah. Yeah. The last one will, the last, and this is the last, it'll surprise some people. So very often we think of uh, victims as like codependent, right? Like people who are in relationships with narcissists are often labeled as codependent. And what the research has found is that a lot of these people, mostly it's women, don't fit the typical codependent prototype because they're really self directed. They're confident, they're strong, they have high levels of self acceptance, they're used to handling things well, and they often are really successful, smart, strong women. And that's a differentiating factor. Again, great quality, right? None of these are bad qualities at all. Um, but it's something that was a little bit surprising that came out in the research because you often think of people who are with narcissists as weak in some way. But the women who have a really good sense of self and self-esteem often struggle the most in those relationships because that gets broken down over and over again. And they start to suffer from something called cognitive dissonance, which is when you have these two realities that you're holding at the same time but they're not connecting. So it's like, am I confident or am I totally weak? Is he good or is he bad? And the people who are self-directed and confident in that way, it's almost harder for them because they start to have this gap that grows between what they know about themselves and what they're starting to feel about themselves in this relationship. And that really impacts their functioning and then their ability to make decisions and their ability to get out of the relationship.
Dang. Because, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember having some discovery calls with people who were in such a relationship. And they were like, I can't leave because, when he's good, he's amazing, but when
Yeah.
he's not good, and the kids will be hurt. I gave him the kids for 3 days. We were separated, and he didn't feed them at all. But I know he still loves them. It's just all this stuff going on that it's mind blowing. And I said, well, for this and this action that the guy is taking, didn't you call the police? No, but this will happen and that will happen. So it's very hard to make a judgment in the end because you have this hope that things will go well, that the person will change, that they will
Mhm.
understand. And this is because you have great qualities. And how
Mhm.
about confidence? Does it matter at all if you are highly confident or not?
It could be either. You know, you could be the prototypical person who doesn't have a lot of confidence and thinks that they're not worthy of good treatment, and that's why they stick around. But like I was saying, that self-directed quality is actually somebody who has a lot of confidence. And sometimes narcissists are really attracted to that because they want to take a strong woman down, as sad as that is.
And what do they get from taking a strong woman down?
A sense of pride, a sense of validation that they accomplished something, as
Impossible.
sad as that is.
Right. So now
Yeah.
that we have reassured all the nice women around here and all the nice men, that because they are so good, smart, humble, hardworking, sociable, pleasing, they are going to attract a lot of people, including some narcissistic behavior. So it's very tool that we can use to deflect the attention of such people, or do we leave the episode with like, oh my gosh, we are doomed?
You're not doomed. You just have to get good at discerning.
Mm.
I think one thing that's helpful is having a clear list of the qualities you're looking for in a partner. And I don't mean physical qualities like makes a lot of money, or of course that can be on there too. Um, or, 6'2", but things like really hears me and validates my experience when we're in an argument. Um, Builds me up, cares about my feelings, things like that, attunes to me. Things that you can't see necessarily. If you if you kind of have that criteria set for yourself when you're looking for a partner and they're non-negotiables, I'd say like have at least five non-negotiables. Um, then when somebody doesn't meet that, and a narcissist certainly wouldn't meet those criteria, um, it's pretty easy to say, you know what, this isn't it for me. Even though you make me feel really good with all your love bombing, you're not seeing me, you're not hearing my feelings, you're not validating my experience. So this isn't it.
So let's drop something you don't expect here. What if two narcissistic people meet? Could they make a good couple because they are kind of similar?
They usually are pretty repelled by one another.
Ah,
Um, yeah. Sometimes you will see the personality disorders where narcissism lies are called cluster B personality disorders. And within that, there's borderline personality disorder, narcissism, and a few others. Um, Very often you will see a borderline narcissistic couple. Uh, so they have flavorings of similarities, like they both are very focused on their own needs and not so focused on others. They both will be volatile. They both will be kind of dramatic and erratic. And this is an explosive, toxic relationship, as you might imagine. So they can attract each other there. But two narcissists, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to really want to be with each other.
right. Just in case, because
Yeah.
there could be questions in people's mind thinking, but I'm a little bit of a narcissist myself. Maybe.
Well, yes, and that happens all the time. I so often get partners of narcissists coming to me and wondering, am I a narcissist? My partner's saying I might be narcissistic. Could this be true? It's gaslighting.
Right.
And it's projection.
Yeah, so the narcissistic person will, especially now with all the plethora of information we have, and some of which not quite scientifically there, and so the narcissist could anticipate your complaints about their lack of whatever attention and really listening, and then they could know how to manipulate you back to think that it's all your fault because you have a problem. So that's part of it. I don't know
Mhm.
how it becomes so, the dialects is so good, the grammar is good, and they move every sentence. I don't know what is this gift they have, the gift of loquacity, and they can talk to you and make you think you are ill.
Mhm.
And then they
Yeah.
write to the parents and relatives, I'm very worried about Daisy. She's showing problems, da da da. And people believe them and they are the victim, and I'm just mind blowing.
Yeah, I know. It's heartbreaking to see.
It is, yeah. And people feel like they're trapped, they cannot get out.
Yeah.
Why then, if we are such good people, we see that we're not treated fairly and we can't get out of a relationship? Why are we
It's
stuck?
it's that cognitive dissonance that I mentioned earlier.
Right.
um, it really impacts your brain and it keeps you in kind of your instinctual survival brain, which is the back part of your brain, rather than your prefrontal cortex, which is where
The thinking.
logical thought, yeah, good decision making happens here,
Mm.
logical thought, controlling your emotions, all of that's kind of offline when you're in cognitive dissonance, and it impacts you're in like a brain fog almost. It impacts your ability to think clearly and make good decisions. And then sometimes you do want to leave when you're in that all bad. He's all good or he's all bad. And so when you're in all bad part of your brain, you might feel motivated to leave. You might break up with them, you might move out. And then, over time, you start to fall back into this all good side. and get back together and think, well, it wasn't that bad, or they said they're going to change. I'm sure they will. I mean, sure, they haven't gone to therapy yet, but one day they will.
Hmm. Well,
Oh,
actually, do they actually change? And yeah, you want to
no,
finish your
that's what I was
thing?
going to talk about. Yes. Another thing to know about narcissism is that aside from developmental disorders like autism and intellectual disability and ADHD, where things actually affect your brain, it is the only disorder in the DSM-5, which is the manual that psychologists use to diagnose people, the only other disorder that's categorized as pervasive, meaning it's there across all areas of your life and it's there from birth.
Interesting.
So, like with autism, you don't change that, right? You might teach people some skills to adapt to some of the deficits if they have deficits, but you don't change autism. Somebody's neurodiverse and that's just who they are. Same with narcissism. It is one of the only other pervasive disorders in the DSM-5.
So does it mean that we are born with it? So it's nothing to do with how we were raised?
It can be both. Certainly, how you were raised has a big influence. But once that's formed, it is pervasive. It's very unlikely to change. You might be able to get them to adapt a little bit, especially if they see it as favorable. Like if they benefit from it in some way, if they have a better access to somebody with good finances, they might act appropriately. Or if they have access to somebody who makes them feel like they are in high esteem because they're with them, right? Like if it gives them some benefit, they may build some relationship skills to keep that person around. But you're not going to see a huge change. It's just their personality.
That's a personality. I did read in some forums for single people of people who've been married for a long while to a narcissist that went through hell and back. But one of them I remember said they do become more mellow with age. Is that possible?
Yeah. I have heard that as well. Yeah. Um, I don't I don't know of any, research necessarily saying that. It might be out there, but anecdotally, I've heard that as well.
Hmm.
I think you just have less energy for, any
Yeah,
kind of antics as you get older and you're like, it's
yeah,
too,
yeah.
who cares?
Who
Life's too
cares?
short to fight
Yeah,
and manipulate and
they look
cheat.
back, this is not worth it. And then
Yeah.
another thing, I can't remember the name, but there's a guy here in my area, and he has a paper. I forgot the title, but it's about the impact of having a narcissistic boss at work. So the impacts during board meetings. I did want to interview him and ask what is the difference. So does that mean that whatever you said up to now will apply at work? So if your boss is a narcissist, your manager, your big line manager, your HR guy, if you're a narcissist and you have all these amazing qualities, so are you more likely to be maybe exploited or demoted or something?
Not necessarily demoted because you might
Hmm.
actually really accommodate them well, right?
Hmm.
They might be hard to work with, but because you're cooperative and adaptable and have high empathy, you might actually be one of their favorites. Um, that's the thing. Narcissists have positive sources and negative sources. So some people they idealize. It's like the golden child in a family where they exemplify all of the narcissist's favorite traits. And so the narcissist loves them and dotes on them. And this golden child or golden employee brings them a lot of praise and recognition. And then there's the scapegoat in a family or in a workplace, and they embody more of the negative traits that the narcissist has but doesn't want to admit they have. So maybe this employee like talks back or is more outspoken or more self-centered themselves. The narcissist will often peg them as the problem child and have problems with them. So it totally depends. Like it really depends on how you show up at work and how uh, malignant the narcissist is as well.
Gosh, I'm so glad I never met a single person in my life that I
Mm,
could think they are a narcissist, and I'm so glad I'm not with them, sort of thing. I think there is an overdiagnosis. People think that everyone is a narcissist.
yeah.
Sometimes they just have a disorder or a personality issue. Could a narcissist be also a sociopath, or could it be a person who has autism or something, or are they all perfectly mentally well, but they have this personality disorder? What's the big difference there?
You probably wouldn't see a lot of those coexisting because narcissism is a diagnosis, right? It's a diagnosis just like antisocial personality disorder, which is what you mean by sociopath. That's the technical term for it. Those are in the same cluster. So they're both in cluster B, that cluster that I was talking about earlier. So you're either one or the other. You're not both.
Hmm.
Yeah.
At least they don't have lots of stuff. It's only one. So there is no diet, no fasting, no surgery. They can't do anything. If a narcissist looking back 40-year-old, he looks and says, oh, I don't really have a happy marriage. I'm not really doing well at work. If he looks back and say, well, this is not working, could he ever redeem himself?
I mean, I think anything's possible. As I said earlier, the motivation for change is usually that it benefits them in some way.
Right.
Um, so if he's looking at his marriage and his life and going, man, my behavior has really ruined all these things, I should change my behavior, then that benefits him. More often than not, he's going to say, all these people were awful and I'm a victim and, project all of his traits out on others.
Right. Did you say that this is something we are born with, like genetically we have an issue, or do we
It's
develop it in the early years of childhood when we are really developing the brain high speed?
Well, we don't really know that about almost any mental health disorders. There's a lot of hypotheses. Some are that it's genetic, some are that it's nurture, nature versus nurture is this ongoing debate. There's no clear answer. Certainly, a history of trauma, attachment trauma, is a clear path to having a personality disorder. I don't really think there is such thing as a person who has a personality disorder and has not experienced attachment trauma in childhood.
Yeah, that's a whole topic, attachment trauma.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
does it mean that you probably saw thousands of clients? So have you ever had a person that came to you and said, I'm a narcissist, help me?
Yeah, I actually have.
You did.
Yeah.
And were
Well,
they
so here's
honest?
what I work with couples, not almost exclusively, probably 70% of my practice is couples, 30% are individuals. And very often, couples will come in and the wife will say, or the husband will say, I think this person has narcissistic qualities. And they'll say, yeah, I agree. I think I do. And I want to change it. Um, I have had clients come in as well and say, and this is what I was talking about earlier. I think I'm a narcissist. And then we get farther into it and they're actually in a relationship with a narcissist. But yeah, it's like, no, honey, you're not the narcissist. Um, but yes, I have actually had somebody who said, I think I have narcissistic personality disorder. I want to change it. Um, what I've experienced, that's happened a few times, and what I've experienced is that therapy does not go very deep and it's very short-lived because it's kind of performative. The whole really like the personality makeup of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder is that they're defending against their feelings of inadequacy. And so they're projecting them out on others. They have these grandiose views of self that are covering up the fact that they actually feel really deeply inadequate at their core. And they're not even conscious of this inadequacy. It's like a big personality built up to defend against that core belief. So if you start to get too close to that core belief, it's deeply uncomfortable, and really like the whole reason they've created this personality is to defend against this. So they usually don't go too far in therapy for that reason. It's just it feels too threatening to go deeper and really look at what's happening within.
That's quite frightening, actually.
Hmm. Hmm.
So they don't stand a chance to easily change. Maybe if I have a huge desire, maybe they have lateral thinking and realize, oh, yes, I'm benefiting from this, but I could be happier if my wife and my husband, whatever, they were happier. And so I could, but I just, this empathy, do you develop that from scratch?
Right, right. You don't. That's what you teach the skills of how to fake it, but you don't necessarily ever feel it.
So maybe it's a hardened person. The heart is actually closed. If we talk about heart, they think they cannot trust anyone.
Hmm.
So only God can do something there. It's like a miracle because they're like, no,
Hmm.
I cannot trust. I have to win. I have to be number one all the time. I have to be the important person. I have to be in the center. I wonder what happened to these children when they were tiny. And so now they're looking for reassurance. They now then go and look for such a person that is a pleasant person, humble, hardworking, and it will tolerate them long enough that they can just do their game. It's very sad. Let's do a happier ending. Have you got any tips for us? If you are a person that has these amazing 5 traits, how do you develop this gift of discernment? So you have to set your boundaries, set up your values, and how do you understand if a person has empathy? I'm not really sure about this. Can you just fake empathy and say, oh, I'm so sorry it hurts, but I actually don't care? You know what I mean? How do you understand the difference?
There's kind of a felt sense when you can tell um, that somebody has empathy versus if they're faking it. A lot of people can just intuitively tell that they are feeling what, they're feeling what you're feeling. And if if it's falling flat, trust your intuition. That's what I always kind of experience when I see it in couples therapy in the room is they might be saying all the right things and going through the motions. And I'll ask the partner who's receiving the empathy, how is this landing? And they're like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And if you're in that situation, trust your intuition.
So if I show you who they are, believe it.
Believe them. That's right.
Right, right. It's a lesson learned for today. It's a bit disheartening though, because we as people who have these 5 or 10 good qualities, we want to look at people with a ray of hope and love, and everyone is gonna get better. We have to be tolerant. You can't expect a perfect person because you have your own problems. So we want to project this goodness aura on everyone and shed this golden dust. But sometimes, whatever we think, the other person is there to use us, and that hurts. And so, to avoid a lot of mess in our house and with the children and relatives, whatever, we might remain in a relationship that is deeply unsatisfying because we realize we've been manipulated and we can't get out. And it might be more painful to get out sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it can be. Or it feels like it will be until you have the freedom and you start to get your sense of self back and your confidence back. And then you
Yeah.
realize it was worth all the trouble of getting out.
Yeah, so there shouldn't be a symbiosis. We should
Mhm.
detach when we realize our personality is being quashed by the need of the other personality. Maybe that's the time that narcissists or not, were to think back and say, hold on a minute, everything that he or she says is important, but what I do, what I feel, doesn't matter. In words, it matters, but in reality, this person is setting up all these boundaries that are not there, they're invisible, but actually cannot be me. That's interesting.
Mhm.
Wow. Good luck, everyone.
I would say just remember if you have these traits, you're an amazing partner. You just got to
I,
find someone who's also an amazing partner.
of course, which
Yeah.
happens 90% of the times. There are things, and I think I always repeat myself. You probably don't because you haven't done 250 episodes, but I did. So I always say don't rush into living together and getting married because chances are if you spend enough time with these people, you will realize they don't have the empathy that you would like to have in your life. And if they don't, you have time to go. But if you are already living together, or got married, or you have kids, that becomes difficult. It
Yeah,
becomes
it
really
sure
difficult.
does.
So
Mhm.
invest time in getting to know this person. And I wanted to recommend that you guys, if you have a question, you're not sure, am I or am I not? Look up Sarah Schewitz, did I say correct? And
Mhm.
go to her website, which is called coupleslearn.com. And maybe she will be open to have a video consultation for free, from what I realized, looking at your lovely website. And she can help you to understand if you are at high risk or not, or maybe if you are already with such a person. Can you make something happen so that things are easier? Because there are ways to survive with a narcissist. If he's kind of compatible with your way of living, it could be you don't need all this empathy. You don't need all this love. You just want to be two adults living in the same house and they're both doing their own things and they just live together. Who knows? There are lots of couples like that. So we're not saying it's all bad, it could be quite bad, but some people have managed to somehow survive it because maybe it was not such a narcissist that was abusive or toxic to such a level they will destroy you. I don't know. I'm not the expert. You are the expert. But is it possible to be happy with a narcissist person?
It completely depends on your standards, like you said. Yeah.
Right. So here we go. That's the touch of gold, Midas touch. I have no idea. Well, so thank you so much, Sarah, for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I learned a lot, and I'm sure I will never ever enjoy being with a narcissist because I do like empathy very much, and I do not like to be used. That's kind of thing that goes against my personality.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, thank you again. I hope that you guys listening to this episode have found it really useful and informative and that you will share it with some friends. Maybe a friend that you think might be in a relationship that is not quite there, or maybe a person that could benefit from having therapy. So, if you are in Maine or if you are using Zoom, you're able to access Dr. Schewitz anytime. I mean, US time, okay? Not during the middle of the night. Just send an email and find out what you can do about your relationship. See if it's toxic. See if you can find out who you are and how you can create a life that you want using mindset and the knowledge of how the mind works. Because this is all about how the brain works, how people are attached, and what is this vibration. So thank you again, and I'll see you all next week. Thank you, Sarah. Bye bye.
Bye bye.